Okay, good evening all. Welcome to the RAEL live recovery stories. Hope you all had a good day. And tonight I got a youngster who's going to speak to you tonight. He's 20 years old. He'll obviously tell you his story. And just from my side, I had a beautiful day that I managed to. Well, we won today. We won. The law took its course and we won. And I managed to get mom out of the old age home, and she's sleeping. She's well. She's fed, and she looks absolutely lovely. Yeah, not really tired, Eileen. It's just more of a nice sense of relief. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Richie. Nice sense of the relief that I could get mom out of there, and where everyone said you can't do it because of the lockdown and it's the law and it's this and it's rules and regulations. So it means something in life that if you really want to go take something on, don't talk about it, take it on. If you win, at least you can say, well, I tried. Very much like addiction. Very much like addiction. Take it on, you go there, you do your program, and you go out and something happens and you don't stick to the rules and you relapse highly, and you know what is going to happen. So we had probably 10% chance of winning, but God is good. My advocate is good, and we won. So praise God. And mommy's rested well, and she's in a new room, all been sanitized by Adi and by Angus, and cleaned by Tim and young Keenan. Everyone played their part. Every single person played their part. Carl drove today. Graham drove today. It was 2 trips to Worcester to get her stuff. We got a sponsored ambulance through my brother to bring my mom up here. Leroy played his part. So did Lee Jason, surprisingly, Richie. Lee Jason doesn't normally play a part of anything, but anyway. Oh, yes, I got him out of prison. Yeah, sorry. But anyway, everyone played their part to make it, and we've got a beautiful carer for mom, a woman with a lot of experience, and a woman who you can see loves God, and hi Vanessa, who loves God, and who's going to fit into this house, looking after mom. She's sleeping in, and that's beautiful. And obviously, a big thank you to Dr. Rihanna DeToy, for all you know that I do go out with her. She traveled down with us. She looked after mom. She traveled in the ambulance back with mom. So it was a real team effort, real coming together. And when we drove away there, it was 5 years that my mother was there. And I'm not going to badmouth the place because she had a lot of happy times there. It's just when they changed management, he became a dickhead. And I haven't got time for dickheads. Not when it comes to my mother. So yeah, I'm going to introduce young Jarrod. It's his first time he's ever going to share his story on with the audience, and I think you just get him a slight bit of slack. But he's not here to impress. He's not here to get Oscars. He's here to tell a story. And at the age of 20, let's try and save this boy's life. At the moment, he's got nothing but me and God. Let's try and pull together and save his life and do something for him. God bless you. And here is the young man.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Jarrod Stassen. I'd just like to thank Mr. Hall for giving me this opportunity to share my story. And thank you to everyone out there watching at this moment. I'd just like to start with the serenity prayer, so you can just give me a moment. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. I'm 20 years old. I'm originally from Cape Town, born and raised in Rondebosch. My father and mother were together until about the age of 7. They split up. I moved with my mother to Durban. So, stayed with my auntie, went to school in Hillcrest from the grades 1 to 4. From grades 1 to 4, everything was going well. I remember getting into a little bit of trouble in my earlier stages of life in class was always like, wouldn't say the class clown, but always created a bit of havoc. Always like spent a bit of time outside the principal's office. But other than that, I did my schoolwork at home. I remember always my mother was working. She was obviously she was single mother, working, supporting me, and I was home alone most of the time. So I made do with what I had. I spent a lot of time outside. I was involved with scouts growing up. Did a lot of cross country as well in my earlier, and athletics in my earlier younger stages of life from around 1 to 7. So around grade 5, I moved back with my father in Cape Town, and grade 5 and 6 I spent with my father. I remember when I was 13, I was in grade, how's it, Richie? Thank you. How's it, Garth? In grade 7 is when I would say the problem started. I started smoking cigarettes. I remember the first time I started smoking cigarettes, I was doing it at Scallum in the bathroom, and my mother caught me smoking cigarettes in the bathroom. I think it all started with the cigarettes, like the Scallumness, not wanting to be caught, and the whole rush of knowing that I shouldn't be smoking. I remember moving again when I was in grade 8 to my mother, when she was staying in Pinetown, which was back now in Durban. So from ages 7 to 13, I'd really moved from Cape Town to Durban about 4 times. Every time switching schools. I had switched schools now about 3 times. In grade 8, I also got left to my own devices quite a bit. Mother was always working full-time, supporting me. And spent a lot of time, I got involved with BMXing and skateboarding a lot, so I was on the street. I met these 2 younger gentlemen, about 2 years older than me. I was about 15 at this time. And they were also skateboarding. So I went to their house one day, and they were smoking weed. I'd never smoked weed before. I'd never seen what weed looked like, even though I always had this interest in smoking weed. I don't know why. Just the fact of wanting to know how it felt and what it would be like. So we went to the park, we smoked weed, and that was that. I smoked, and then I carried on smoking with these friends, And after a while, I found out that I don't want to speak bad or anything, but my mother was also smoking weed. So I ended up smoking a lot of weed. It was always there in the house. My mother had it in her room. She had it with a cup of tea in the evening and when she went to work in the morning. But it didn't make her life unmanageable. She always was able to go to work and come back. So I was stealing her weed. And eventually, after a while, I found out where my friends were buying the weed. I found out where the dealer was, and I was getting my own. The friends slowly fell away the more I started using, as I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need to hang out with them in order to smoke. Later on, I found out that the same guys I first started smoking weed with, they were smoking unga. Unga is now a heroin-based drug. So the first time I found out they were smoking in my room, and I thought, let me try this, let me give it a shot. So I was about 13 at this point of time, staying in a flat with my mother in Pinetown. I was going to a private school, and doing what I needed to. I was doing athletics, I was doing my classes, my grades were still good back then, and I remember the first time I smoked, I did feel kind of lightheadedness, but it didn't grip me yet. The first time I did unga, it never gripped me yet for some reason. Did it once or twice, 3 times. The friends ended up moving away, I stayed there. Still now knowing where the dealers were. Grade 9, I was about 16 now, grade 9 in Durban. Remember, I had moved already now about 5 times up and down since the age of, I'd say 7, 8. Each time, before, not even knowing that I was manipulating at this point of time. My parents, thinking back only now when I'm actually in recovery, I think back and how I actually manipulated. When I didn't like the way things were going at my mother's, I'd say the right things and I'd do the right things in order to get my father. I'd basically work them against each other in order to move to a different place, in order to start again, shall I say. Each time starting again, not actually starting again, just starting with the same pattern which I did use drugs. And so I'm in grade 9 now, and my mother's staying with me, single apartment in Pinetown. And the one day I was walking to the shops, and there was this older gentleman, and he met me on the way to the shops, and he asked me, do you know what hash looks like? So I'm like, hash? I think that's like a type of weed or something like that. Hi, Joni. And so we smoked, and from that day on, I remember smoking on the steps, and from that day on, I was smoking every day. I was in about grade 9, and eventually I started getting paranoid. I started thinking that teachers were on my case, and my grades fell a lot. My grades were falling, and I started selling my things. Like, I didn't even know what was happening. I'd never known what addiction was, and this was about 16, 15. I was hectic on it, and never knew that I was actually in a spiral. Started selling my clothes, and eventually I dropped out of school, sold my school clothes, and my mother found out one day. She came into my room, she opened up my cupboards, and she saw I had no clothes left in my cupboard, and she just started crying. And about 2 days after, a week after that, I was just staying at home, going out, smoking, coming back, and about a week after that, my mom said, "Look here, Jarrod, I'm putting you on a bus to your dad." And I fought against that because I had liked the feeling the drug it gave me, and I didn't want to stop at that point. I didn't see where my life was going. I was blind to the fact. And my mother sent me on the bus to Durban. My dad didn't even know I was coming until I had gotten halfway there. Started in a new school again, so I'd moved about 6 times now from the age of 7 to 16. Started in a new school. My dad tried everything he can to get me in the school, as I was already too old for my grade. And started school, got involved in sports again, and got involved in sports in school again, and everything was going well. About 4 months into my new school, I met this girl. First love, fell in love with her. Everything was going alright, and eventually we broke up, and I started drinking. I couldn't smoke weed as I'd already been tested in that school and got caught for it, and they were testing me, so I couldn't smoke weed. So I was now doing the alcohol hectic. In grade 10, I ended up dropping out again as my grades started deteriorating due to my alcohol use and because of the weed use. At this point in grade 10, my mother had come down from Durban, and she was staying in Mowbray. I purposely started a fight with my father in order for him to kick me out of the house, because I knew that my mother would take me in due to her, how shall I say it, due to her enabling. I knew that she would take me. Stayed in Mowbray with my mother. I was working at the V&A waterfront at that point in Mowbray. I was for some reason not on the heroin anymore. The main reason is I couldn't find a dealer. If I had found a dealer, I would have most probably been on it again. And I was going to the V&A, coming back, working, doing the cycle for about a month. My mother found a new guy on the internet who stayed in Durban. I had gotten my hopes up that I was maybe going to go stay with her in a new place. She had shown me the place where she was going to stay, and we had gone looking at a few places, and one day she told me, I'm going back to Durban. I met this guy, and you can either come with me or you can stay. A thought went through my mind as I don't really want to move anymore. I've moved about 8 times from the age of 7, and every time having to start over, meet new groups of friends, get reintegrated into a back. So through all this moving, I actually also became isolated. I became an isolated user. Through the isolation, I found it hard to actually make friends because of the distancing from other people. So I was an isolated user. I never used it with people. So eventually I said, no, I don't want to go with you, Mom, and I'd rather stay here in Cape Town. So my mind told me, okay, I'm going to go to Long Street and I'm going to find a backpackers in Long Street, or I'm going to find somewhere that I can stay for a little while. I found a backpackers in Long Street. I told my mother I had saved now around 1,800 Rand, gave the backpackers the 1.8, and I moved into the backpackers. Started clubbing a bit while I was in Long Street, and all the money I spent working, I would spend that night. My mother had now moved to Durban, and basically the backpackers told me one day, you're not paying your rent, we want you to go, please. So I sold my tablet and my shoes in order to pay for the rent, and they said, no, we don't want the money, we just want you out. So I said, okay, no problem. So I packed my stuff and I waited at the garage around the corner, and I phoned my father. I'm like, this is what happened, my mom's gone to Durban. And there was also a bit of manipulation in there, as I said that she just left me here and I was staying in Long Street. And yeah, so I went back to my father. I'm now around, I had just turned 18 while staying in Mowbray, and moved back to my father. I was now staying in the garage. My dad cleared out the garage for me, got all these tools cleared out. I had a little couch in there, found a bar. So I started working at this bar around the corner of the house, around the corner from the house. And I was working from around 5 to about 5 the next morning. In order to, I'd say, keep up with working these long hours, I would smoke a lot of weed in my breaks, and I'd do a lot of energy drinks, and eventually, through socializing with this crowd of people, I found people who were now using this drug called Cat. I never used Cat before, and did it, and it helped me get through the long hours. Well, I thought it helped me. Eventually, I started crashing. After about a month, I started crashing, and in order to come down, I started smoking buttons now. Didn't smoke unga at this point in time, even though that was my drug of choice. Couldn't find the dealer. If I had found the dealer, I would have used it. Definitely, I would have. And started selling my clothes and my possessions again, my kettle, my TV, and eventually I used my mother against my father again. And I phoned my mother while she was staying in Durban. She was now staying in Durban North. And I told her, look, I'm staying in the garage, I'm cold, I'm wet. But that wasn't actually the main reason why I wanted to move back. The main reason, again, why I wanted to move back was because I had depleted all my resources for living that life for that duration. In that I depleted my resources for living that duration of time there. I had no money anymore. I lost my job. They caught me doing drugs in the bathroom. And about a week after that, my mom took me back. I went on airplane, went to Durban North. And Durban, I'd say, would be a hotspot for heroin in South Africa, or for unga as a hotspot. So I went back to Durban North, stayed with my mother for about a week. After about a week, I went to Pinetown, the first place I started using unga, in order to, I think, fetch food for my mom. my mom sent me to Pinetown to go fetch a box of fish for her and come back. And I knew that the first person that I smoked with stayed in Pinetown, so instead of fetching the fish, I used the money which I was going to spend on the fish for to smoke heroin with my first friend that I started smoking with. Came back the same day. Mother saw the change in my behavior and saw that something was up. And I still denied the allegations. The next morning I woke up and remember cigarettes was my first addiction. The same thought pattern that runs through my mind to get drugs I used to for the same to get cigarettes. That's the same thought pattern which I use in order to get my cigarettes on the outside end. So next morning I woke up, there were no cigarettes in the house. I took my lighter, threw it on the ground, it pops, my mom's boyfriend rushes me, we get in a physical altercation, I get kicked out. The landlord of the building then also tells me she does not want me back on the property. My mother wants to take me to a shelter. She takes me to the shelter, I throw a scene at the shelter. I said, if you leave me at the shelter, you will not see me again, and this and that, and make a whole tantrum there. I did this manipulation purposefully so that the owner of the shelter would not want to take me. After that, I came up in my mind with, let me mention my auntie. And I stayed with my auntie in Durban the first time that my mother and parents split. So my mother and I, we go to Hillcrest in Durban. Auntie is home, and my mother and auntie sit down with me and they say, this is how it's going to work. In order for you to come stay with me, I want you to go to rehab first. So what's going through my mind, and they say this in a lot, well, one of the reasons why what addicts do is they try to get the key back to the house. And that was what I was trying to do, or they go into recovery in order to either get the trust of their parents back, or to get, it's another art of manipulation in order to get their way. So I said yes, because I knew that if I did this recovery, or I went to this rehab, that I would definitely get the key back and I would have a place to stay. And so I went to the rehab. I stayed for a month and a half. I left, and by then I knew I had gotten the key back for that duration of time that I was there. Stayed at my auntie's. My auntie was helping me do my studies. I was studying IGCSE, if I'm not mistaken. Everything was going well, putting my time in, and then I started derailing again. I found out where the nearest heroin dealer was, which was any taxi rank in South Africa, I think. And started buying weed, buying heroin. From as soon as I smoke weed, and I know for a fact that I cannot smoke weed again, because as soon as I smoke weed, a switch goes in my head, says, okay, I've smoked weed now, I've done alcohol, so what is wrong with this type of high? So I started buying heroin again, and I was working at a club now. I was working at a restaurant at the moment. And all the money I was using went to heroin, a little bit of food for myself in between shifts, and eventually studies were deteriorating. I wasn't putting as much time into my studies anymore. I was mostly out, and Auntie could see this. Auntie was trying to drug test me. I told her the last time I smoked weed was a month and a half ago, so if you test me still, the weed will still be in my system, so it wouldn't make sense to test me. Can you let it ride out a bit longer, then you can test me. So this went on for about 2 months, and so I just wanted to get a jacket. Sorry, Cole, can you pass my jacket there? There's a jacket. Sorry, it's a bit cold here in Worcester. It's raining at the moment. The cold front has come into Cape Town hectically, and I just realized I'm cold. Shot. Thank you, DJ. Yeah, it's cold now in Cape Town. The rain has come. I think we really need the rain. Excuse me for a second. Yeah. Shot, thank you. And so my I can't disagree there, Richard. And yeah, so I was deteriorating. I wasn't putting as much time in my studies as I should have been, and my auntie could see that. My auntie was in communication with my mother, and but I was still studying. I was still keeping up this facade. I was still pretty much conning, and after a while, I think I'm struggling to come to this point, because this is the point where my mother passed away, and I'm struggling to put this into words. I haven't put this into words in a long time. I've been getting away from the subject, should I say. The night before this incident happened, I was on a conversation with my mom. It was about 4 days before my birthday. It was, I remember, 16th of October 2017. And had a conversation with my mother the day before. The next morning came. I woke up. My auntie was in Durban North fetching something for a car parts, and she gave my cousin a call. My cousin didn't want to tell me what was happening, and I just had a feeling something was up when they said, look, we're going to town at this moment. So I phoned my mother's phone, and someone else picks up the phone. And all of a sudden, my heart drops. I realized, okay, shit, something's happened. But I knew it was not good. After a while, my cousin realizes I found out, and tells me straight up, look, your mom's been in a fatal car accident. She's currently in ICU in, I forgot what hospital it was, not important, in Durban North. And I went to go see my mother. My auntie was preparing me. I went into the ICU unit, and I saw my mom connected to plugs, to a adrenaline, to a heart pulse reader, and yeah, it was quite a shock to me, because I'd never expected in all my life to see my mom like that. And first thing I did leaving that hospital is go to the bathroom and take a hit of weed, a really big hit of weed, in order to numb that pain. I didn't know how else to deal with that pain. I've never taught myself or been taught how to deal with such pain, and that was how I did deal with pain in my life. I think that was the number one reason. I was having a chat with someone earlier this week, and I think that was the number one reason I did use Unga, was to cover up my pain. And short call, and I can't disagree. I really can't. And so that was the only way I knew how to deal with that pain. So I went in the bathroom, took a hit of weed, and the first thing that was going through my mind after seeing that my mom there in the ICU on the way home is, how am I going to get the money next to my auntie's bed, how am I going to get the money which belonged to me next to my auntie's bed? The whole time that's running through my head. How am I going to get to the taxi rank and buy my heroin without my auntie realizing what I'm doing? That was all that's going through my head. I hadn't smoked Unga for about 6 days before this, and I knew that when I saw that I was about to go on a binge. I got home, took my money next to my auntie's bed without her permission, as she was helping me save. And once I took the money, I told my auntie, I'm going for a walk, I need to free my mind. As a con I am, I told her, I'm going to go free my mind. Went to a taxi rank, bought a good amount of heroin, came home, ran myself a bath, made like I'm about to get ready for the night, smoked the 6 quarters. I knew that this was going to be a downward spiral, and I knew it was. Like, I was aware of that. So after that, my mother stayed in hospital for about 5 days after that in ICU. Condition was going up and then deteriorating, going up, then eventually deteriorating. So the doctors gave me the decision whether I'm going to pull, or as they say, pull the plug, which meant take the adrenaline off and help and take the breathing machine off. I would say this was a very hard decision to make, but it was, yeah, through this time I really couldn't believe it. And the day came where I had to make the choice to take off the adrenaline and take off the breathing piece, and she passed away. I saw her pass away. It was quite a traumatic experience. I went home, and now my auntie, knowing that my mother had left me in her hands, took responsibility of taking care of me. At this point, my downward spiral of unga or heroin use went hectically downhill fast. Through the 5 days that she was in hospital and a week after, in order to get my mind right, shall I say, or I used the excuse to get my mind right in order to take, I'd say, a breather or time to just do drugs. I went, took a week off, and when I went back, they said they would replace me at my job. So eventually I got a job working at the club that my cousin used to work at. And I started working at this club, which was in Hillcrest, back in Durban. Now moved from Durban to Cape Town about 9 times, each time using a different drug. Each time my drug use got worse, and each time finding new ways to manipulate the people around me. And so working at the club, another 5 to 5 shift, and meeting people and associating with people who were using a drug called cat and cocaine. And after my mom passed, I made it a mission or a challenge for me to stop the heroin use, and I slowly put a stop to the heroin use, only using about a quarter every now and then. Started using cocaine in the club in order to keep up with the hours and in order to numb that pain, because I was just fresh out of, it was about 3 weeks after my mom passed, working in the club, needed to numb the pain. Auntie at this point saw the deterioration in me physically and in my actions and in my behavior, and she ended up in hospital due to anxiety and stress. Her blood pressure was very high, and she had to be hospitalized. I got home after work one day, and my cousin tuned me. It is halfly because of you that my mother ended up in hospital. And I thought of this, and I'm like, he's partly right, and I don't want to be in the house if my auntie comes back because of the guilt I'll be feeling. So I took my stuff, packed my stuff in one big bag, took it with me to the bar/club I used to work at, and I kept it there in the storeroom. I slept on I wouldn't say I slept on the street, because there were restaurants at this point. Well, I hadn't slept on the street yet. I'm still getting to that point. And I stayed in the back of this restaurant for about 3 days while I was trying to manipulate people in order to give me a place to stay. And met this girl. She offered me a place to stay there in Hillcrest, fully furnished apartment. Couldn't say no. Slept 3 days in the back of a restaurant, and moved into the house. And once I moved in, I realized this is a free-for-all. I realized this fridge is packed, the bed, and I got this whole place to myself. There's a TV, and making lots of money, no longer needing to give my money to my auntie to save for me. Now I am, should I say, up to my own devices. And I stayed in that cottage/apartment for about a month and a half. This time using a lot of cat, a lot of coke, and in order to come off of the cat and the coke, I was doing a lot of heroin. Putting myself in unspeakable points of danger through my whole life of actually getting heroin. Going into taxi ranks, I never thought of any other way to get it except for going into taxi ranks. Knowing people who I shouldn't have associated with, and being nearly robbed on different occasions in order to get my drugs, not putting myself in danger, knowing I was putting myself in danger, but not caring about it in order to get my drug. And, excuse me, and I was going to a taxi rank about 2-3 in the morning, waking up the dealer, who was a bergish, I'll say, and doing my drugs 2-3 in the morning, doing the same cycle over and over again. Eventually, a month and a half later, I throw a house party at my place. The mother comes back on a Monday. I have the weekend to myself in the house, and the mother comes back on the Monday. The place isn't clean. Mother sees how atrocious the apartment looks, sees the tin foil next to my bed, sees the heroin straws, and eventually says, "Look, I want you out." And this was... So for the first time I went into a rehab, it was to get the key back. The second time now, I got kicked out of the place I was staying at by this chick's mother. And phoned my dad from a shopping center, said, "Dad, I admit I have a problem and I need help." Excuse me. My dad said, "Okay, hang just there, and your auntie's going to come pick you up, or your auntie's going to phone you. Go to your auntie's place, and then we'll sort it out from there." I didn't go straight to my auntie's place. I went to go buy another 7 quarters before I knew I was going back into rehab. Did the 7 quarters. And went on to a bus the next following morning back to my father. And at this point, I was backed into a wall. I didn't want recovery yet. I didn't believe I had a problem. I just believed that I had made the wrong choices and ended up in a bad situation due to stupid choices. I never believed that the stupid choices was a direct result of the actual drug use. Got into Cape Town off the bus. First thing coming off the bus, went into the rehab for 3 months. Was in the rehab for 3 months. We were allowed a weekend home. On that weekend home, I relapsed. I went to a club and didn't use drugs. I drank alcohol though, but I still counts as a relapse. And did my 3 months there. On that day, the exact to the hour, to the minute, I went back home. Went to rehab, did my 3 months, knew that I had gotten the key back, knew that I had been pushed into a wall, and eventually found a way out of that corner I had been in. And went to stay with my father. My father had started his own business at this point, and thank you. And at this point in time, my father and I relationship was steady as I came out of the second rehab. And after about a month thing, I saw my cousin going out and telling my father that he's going out to the club. And eventually, after a while, I manipulated. The art of manipulation. During my drug use, I wouldn't say mastered it, but I became very good at manipulating situations in order to get my way. I told my father, "Can I go out with my cousin?" And he said yes. I said, "I'm only going to drink orange juice." And as stupid as that sound, I believed it myself, so I made my father believe it just as much as I did. When that night I relapsed, I smoked my first bong of weed again, drank a lot, came back home, and that switch went off in my head again. that switch went off in my head again, saying I smoked weed now, I drank alcohol, so that gives me a reason now to go back onto my drug of choice because I've already messed up my sobriety. Started buying. My dad saw what I was doing and also had his suspicions. Wanted to drug test me. Refused the drug test after a while. He just said, "Look, I want you out of my house in 2 months." Before those 2 months, after my father and I relationship was not going well, I was working at Spur, earning about a commission and 150 rand a day. About 120 rand of that went straight to my drug every night, and about 30 rand of that went to taxi fare, cigarettes and food. Around 10 rand went to food. During my use of heroin, I didn't care about food, I didn't care about clothes, I didn't care about anything except for heroin. And on the last day where I was supposed to move out, I found someone on Facebook. I said, this is a situation where I'm at. I need a place to stay. I have a stable job. This and that, and just gave them the whole runaround of I am trustworthy. Let me put 100 rand deposit on, and I promise you'll get your money. So this gentleman takes me into Bellville taxi rank. Obviously the landlord of this room. Go deep into the taxi rank. Turns out this room is right in the middle of Bellville station / taxi rank. Small little room, basin, bed, toilet, shower.
Jarrod,
Yes, sir.
to the point.
Yes, sorry, sir. And ended up isolating in that room for about 2 months, and just only time I left that room was to work, to do my drug, come back, and that was the cycle on and on again. For the first time in my drug use, my physical appearance started deteriorating, and to the point I was getting sores all over my body. I was getting skinnier, and I was no longer fitting to my work clothes. My work could see it. Every day I had to put a plaster over the sores which were visible, and eventually I could see where my life was going. Every night I would look outside that window, I would see Bellville taxi rank. I could see that the way I couldn't stop though. As much as I wanted to stop, every morning I'd wake up with the intention to stop, but could not stop due to the physical craving. And I needed help. I phoned everybody I knew. I phoned my father. He said no, he can't help me. I phoned my family. They said they'd had enough. And I phoned everybody I knew for help, crying for help. And the one night I lay on my bed and I looked up, I closed my eyes and I prayed to God. God, I know I have not been the best. If you can please help me, please can you help me, God? I really need you right now. I can't go on like this. I understand where my life is going. The next morning I got hold of RAEL through one of my mother's friends in Durban. Got hold of RAEL, got hold of Mr. Schuller and Mr. Hall, and through grace of God, I was able to get hold of Mr. Hall, and Mr. Schuller were the only person who would give me a chance. They said, am I ready? Am I sure that you are ready for recovery? As we don't want you to waste your own time and don't want you to get your own hopes up, so are you ready? I said, yes, I'm ready. I can see where my life is going. I really need help. For the first time in my life, I admitted, this is where I'm at. This is what the drugs have done to me. And for the first time, I actually stepped out of denial. They came to see where I was staying. They saw that I was legit and that I really was serious about it. And I came into recovery thanks to Mr. Hall. And Mr. Hall to this day is the only person, and Mr. Schuller, that's ever given me a third chance in my whole life. And how it is now, I would say that through what I've learnt I'm now 7 months sober, and what I've learnt in these 7 months about myself is more than I've learnt about myself in 7 years. RAEL is not only teaching me about my addiction, but it's also teaching me respect, morals, values, dignity, the way to conduct yourself, work ethic. It's more than just teaching me about my addiction, but rather teaching me more about myself. And through that, I'm actually growing. And I never, still to this day, I sometimes catch myself thinking, wow, God has been really good to me. Thank God that through my usage, that I never got hurt, I never got stabbed, I never overdosed, I never meant to, yeah. Like through this day, I catch myself thinking, thank you, God, for everything you've done for me. And yeah, I just like to say thank you to everyone listening. Thank you to Mr. Hall for this opportunity to share my story. Thank you to Mr. Shula and management for everything they're doing for me. And as the days go on, I carry on learning about myself and progressing my recovery. Thank you very much. Thank you.